Recording now.
Good morning and welcome to Do You Have the Guts to Be Healthy? I hope you all are having a great morning so far this morning. I'm Dr. Carrie Thorne and I am a board certified emergency and functional medicine physician. And I wanted to put together some talks because of a number of reasons. The main reason is that I have a history of some fairly significant GI problems for a long time. And as I treated patients, I realized that there were a lot of other people that also suffered from GI problems, but they didn't fully recognize how it impacts their life, nor do they know how to become healthy again. So before I introduce our guest speaker, I just want to make sure that you have a notepad available because he's going to make reference to some really important PubMed IDs. And there will also be a question and answer session at the end. So we encourage you to ask questions. So I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Bob in April at the Perfect Practice Live in Toronto. And he lectured on some similar things as he's going to lecture on today. Dr. Bob Rakowski is a leading clinical nutrition expert. He is a kinesiologist, a certified biological terrain instructor, chiropractor, director of Natural Medicine Center in Houston, Texas, where he treats professional athletes. He has also lectured internationally on various topics in natural and lifestyle medicine for over 24 years. When I heard about all of Dr. Rakowski's accomplishments, I wondered, wow, how does somebody do all this stuff? And then a little bird told me that Dr. Bob's been reading since he was 3 years old. And I have a hunch that he's been reading one book per week since then. So I am very honored to have you here with me today, Dr. Bob, to talk to us and tell us about what people with GI dysfunction can do to improve their health and really feel great again.
Well, thank you. The honor is absolutely mine. You know, one of the things that we realize in functional medicine is there really is no gap in practitioners' goal. We all want patients to get better. We just have different tools. And many times you're seeing people that maybe haven't been led along the right path for health. So I'm excited to have you as part of the team that's not only helping people in crisis, but then moving them in a very positive direction. When we look at the statistics, it's mind-boggling. There are so many people that suffer gut disorders, and most of them are not pathology. They're actually functional circumstances. And what I like to tell people is most digestive problems can be solved by learning which of these things are right for you. So we ask 5 questions. Number 1, what foods are you putting in? And there's a lot of variety on that, but let's just say you could pick a lot of potentially good diets, but there's universal agreement on what's a really bad diet, and that's the standard American diet. How's your digestion? And we have to realize that digestion literally starts in the mind. Pavlov proved that. We want to chew our food. That's part of the process. Then we need good function of literally our stomach, our intestines, our gallbladder, our pancreas. We have more bugs in our gut than we have cells in our body, and some people call that the largest organ. And certainly bugs all eat, drink, and go to the bathroom. And as I tell my patients, the difference between good bugs and bad is what they eat and what they poop. Next question is, how often do you eliminate? Or the simple one-syllable term is poop. So I like to tell people you've got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right. But poop is not just poop, but detoxification, including all the organs of detoxification. And then finally, do you have a leaky gut? And that's something that we may address in another topic on autoimmunity, because we know that when you get foreign proteins into your system, that certainly can trigger autoimmune process. So important question, what are people eating? And, you know, plenty of mindset on where that can go. But Lucretius, I went to Lucretius, I'll go to Hippocrates first. Many years ago, he said, let your food be your medicine. And that was probably a lot easier in the time of Hippocrates. There was nothing genetically modified. There were no herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. Things were organic. The soil was rich. But even back then, Lucretius said one man's food's another man's poison. So we know thousands of years ago, people still had certain food choices that would move them in the wrong direction. My quote is, today, most men's food is really a poison for all humanity, because the things we do to get it is harsh. You look at factory farming, it's one of the most toxic things that we do to the planet. And then again, the tons of herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. There was an article written about diet choices all over the world. And this was considered pretty much the standard American diet. And the only thing that has color in it are the colorful labels. And I use the term endotoxemia when I taught about this, but these are toxins generated within. When you feed these foods to even good bugs in your system, those bugs are ultimately going to become bad bugs. And when they eat the food, they will actually release more horrific toxins that can get into your system. And this is actually a picture from an oncologist's office, and it says for chemo patients only. And we've come to understand that there's a pretty big disconnect from what people are putting in their body to the health circumstances that they're dealing with. And together we want to change that. I listened to a radio podcast a number of years ago, and I wish I knew who to attribute this to, but they said, look, nutrition is not alternative medicine. It's absolutely the foundation of life. So when it comes to food choices, Michael Pollan, author of In Defense of Food, considered one of the most 100 influential people on planet Earth right now, according to People magazine. He has a quote. He says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I modify that. I don't want to complicate it, but I do want to add more detail. Eat clean food, organic food, free-range food, not too much, not too often. There's a science of intermittent fasting. Every color, every day. We know that there's literally synergy and different variety of plant nutrients in every different color. And then the final statement's in a way that honors your physiology and your body goals. So I tell people, if you're training for some type of strength competition, that's going to be very, very different than if you're, someone that spends most of your day meditating. So you want to honor your physiology and your goals, but still mostly plants. So the word on plants is pretty simple. They have a lot of things that we need besides the vitamins and minerals, but we are at the top of the food chain. So as humans, we don't live on dirt, air, and water, but we live on lower level plants and animals that do. So we're what are known as bioconcentrators. Some estimates say that we concentrate the nutrition in our environment to a factor of as much as 10,000. Now, the sad reality is we also concentrate the toxins in our environment as well. So Paul Clayton published articles in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine and on this International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. But he said if someone in Victorian England got to be age 5, their average life expectancy was 80 years old. And what they found quite simply is their diet was very, very different. They ate a lot more nutrient-rich foods, a lot more plants. They certainly moved their bodies more. They were exposed to less toxins. But when they did autopsies on all these people, they realized that only 2% of 80-year-olds died of cancer. Now, maybe their estimates were a little bit off, but it certainly wasn't 1 in 4.4 as it is today. Another factor on food is we do best literally eating one food type at a time. And so when I have people that have gut problems, I have them do what's called monomeals, one food per meal. So one meal, you can eat all the broccoli you want. Another one, all the green beans you want. Another one, all the carrots you want. If you're going to eat a meat, eat chicken and in a smaller portion, see how you do with it. Then maybe the next meal after that's digested, eat meat. 1, you'll digest it more efficiently, but then 2, you'll be able to see if your body's having a reaction. But this is one of my mentors, Dr. George Goodhart, who practiced into his 90s and passed a few years ago. But he simply said, plants, non-starchy vegetables mix well with proteins. Non-starchy vegetables mix well with starches or carbohydrates. Fruits should always be eaten alone because they digest very, very fast. But certainly don't mix starches and protein as the digestion is antagonistic. So how's your digestion? This people could spend an entire lifetime studying. So we're going to simplify it a bit. Pavlov proved that digestion starts in the brain. Remember, he fed the dogs and he conditioned them to associate ringing a bell with that, and they started salivating. And saliva literally has digestive enzymes within it. When we chew our food, we start the process of mechanical breakdown. We get some enzyme breakdown. And we also know that people that chew more eat less. The satiety signal has a better chance of getting to the brain. And in one study, they actually looked at obese people and had them chew their food more, and they consumed nearly 12% fewer calories. So chewing is really quite important. Sometimes I can get deep into science, and I'll try not to overwhelm anybody with that here. But when we look at hydrochloric acid, which is in our stomach, it's so strong that the concentration of hydrogen ion is 3 million times that of arterial blood. So it literally takes a lot of energy to create that level of concentration of any chemical. So it's estimated that it takes 600% more energy to make hydrochloric acid than any other chemical in the body. And so then we'll see that we have all these little organelles here called mitochondria that make 94.4% of human energy. So here's one thing I like to tell people: toxins inhibit mitochondrial function. Toxins take away our energy efficiency. At some point, we could have a conversation on toxicity, but the published symptoms of chronic poisoning include fatigue, sleep disturbance, intestinal distress, allergy symptoms, headaches, confusion, and anxiety. And I tell my patient base that if we eliminated these symptoms, I might have to do something else for a living, because that's literally what everybody's walking in the door with. So if toxins inhibit mitochondria and inhibit energy efficiency, the first chemical that's going to be impaired is hydrochloric acid. And suddenly we don't get the stage to start the digestive process appropriately, especially when it comes to proteins. So we're going to take a tangent and talk about some horrific toxins in the environment that have actually been studied. So in this case, this group was called the Case of the Frozen Addicts. People that are curious can Google that. Just under that, the Case of the Frozen Addicts. And I blew up the subtitle of it, or I didn't on this one, I'm sorry. Basically, it said how this medical mystery improved medicine's understanding of Parkinson's disease. So these individuals injected a synthetic heroin in Los Angeles in the 1980s, and they woke up with Parkinson's. And they realized that they injected a drug called MPTP. So suddenly, just like that, medicine could create Parkinson's in the animal model with a single dose of MPTP. And up until 2018, they thought that that was actually permanent Parkinsonism, until they used a superfood called Ganoderma lucidum, which actually improved the dopamine neuron function to the point where the symptoms of Parkinson's improved pretty dramatically. So I tell people, most people aren't going to be exposed to that level of horrific toxin, but if it can work on that and carbon tetrachloride, which normally causes liver failure, Ganoderma prevents that. STZ was a type of chemotherapy that previously destroyed the beta cells of the pancreas and induced type 1 diabetes. Ganoderma protects the pancreas, Ganoderma protects the liver, Ganoderma protects the brain. Ganoderma is known to pull out all kinds of toxins in the environment. And the good news is that we both have partnered in a way where we can deliver Ganoderma to anybody who drinks coffee or tea by giving them a better choice of coffee or tea. So when we start talking about acid reflux, acid in the stomach is so strong it can digest a steak or burn a hole in your gut if there's not mucus protection. The good news is we usually have the protection, but there's something called the lower esophageal sphincter that keeps acid in the stomach and keeps it from going up into the esophagus. So acid actually is part of how the body maintains tone and prevents acid reflux. However, if we block acid with acid blockers, guess what? Then we can actually create the circumstance where people get more acid reflux. And the acid blocking agents were originally studied in clinical trial for a short period of time, really to promote ulcer healing. But once people start, too many of them actually get addicted to them and take them for years and years on end, compromising their digestion. So the journal Surgery published that when you added acid to the gut, you actually prevented acid reflux. Very important. And when someone does have an ulcer, our favorite herb, Ganoderma, promotes ulcer healing. There was some research that recognized that there's a bug called Helicobacter pylori that can actually be associated with ulcer. The follow-up data is pretty interesting. If you take someone and give them a little dose of Helicobacter and a lot of stress, they get an ulcer. If they get a much bigger dose of Helicobacter but no stress and a healthy gut, they don't get an ulcer. And some references say that that H. pylori is a routine colonizer of the human gastric system, and as much as half the population has it. So the bug by itself is not sufficient to cause ulcer, but the good news is Ganoderma can actually kill H. pylori. When people have acid reflux, almost 80% of them report that coffee is an aggravating factor. Our herb Ganoderma is considered one of the most alkaline foods on the planet. So when you mix it with coffee, which is normally acid, something in it called chlorogenic acid, which that compound actually has a number of benefits, including blood sugar regulation, they get a much more gut-friendly coffee. Gallbladder, these are some very unflattering terms that we call the 5 F's of the gallbladder problems, but it's the fat, 40, fertile, flatulent female. The first 4 of the 5, the fat, 40, fertile female, those all have to do with higher levels of estrogen. And higher levels of estrogen in the body actually deplete certain vitamins, especially vitamin B6, which gives the person altered methylation. Just because we may have a technical audience, when you methylate appropriately, you make something called taurine. Taurine is part of what makes something called taurocolic acid, which is the primary bile acid. And if we don't make that well, then we have gallbladder insufficiency, and we can cause problems for the gallbladder. And the flatulent is they're not digesting their fats very effectively, so they get more gas. I have literally had patients over the past 27 years share the results of gallbladder flushes. And we do let them know that a gallbladder flush, if you have a bad stone, it could potentially get stuck in a duct, and that can cause an acute problem. I personally haven't seen that in my clinical practice, but people have brought in stones. This wasn't someone brought in to me. I took that picture from the internet, but I have had people bring them in and say that it's something that was very good for their gallbladder. So that's something that people can look up. The pancreas, one of the most distressed organs in human physiology. So when we look at what Ganoderma does in terms of the pancreas, we know it's actually proven in PubMed studies to be a powerful therapeutic aid for people with pancreatic cancer. So it's hard to imagine a worse circumstance than pancreatic cancer. When we look at type 1 diabetes, Ganoderma actually enhances the beta cells of the pancreas, and it actually prevents their death, even when they're infected with Epstein-Barr virus. So it may be a little bit of a reach to say that Ganoderma is really good for the digestive pancreas, but there is data to say that it is good for the pancreas in and of itself. One of my favorite supplements is melatonin. Melatonin protects the pancreas. It also is profoundly protective against cancer. There's an article called The 10 Hallmarks of Cancer, and melatonin protects against all 10 parts. And what I tell people is one of the enemies of melatonin is our screen time, our blue lights, our TVs, our smartphones, our iPads. And so I'm a strong proponent of a digital sunset. Get a break from your blue light screens every single day for at least an hour before bed. And then I like the idea of also a day a week having 0 screen time. And there's just a reference that blue light actually elevates cortisol, which is another inhibitor of melatonin. What kind of bugs live in our gut? There's a book entitled 10% Human, and it literally describes all of our DNA. Since we have 10x the bugs in our gut than we have cells in our body, 90% of the DNA in our body is actually bug DNA. So I would often ask people at my seminars, what does a gorilla eat? You know, and people often say, well, a gorilla eats whatever it wants, but it's mostly a vegetarian. It eats mostly leaves. And then I'll usually pick the biggest guy in the room and I'll ask, you know, how many leaves would you have to eat to maintain 600 pounds of muscle? And he would look confused and say, well, that's not even humanly possible. But it is for the gorilla. Why? Because they have bacteria in their gut that literally turn fiber into food. So a balance of bugs in the gut, and maybe I'll even go to this one first. They have something that they call the obese microbiome. And maybe I can blow that up and move that slide over. There's our obese microbiome as they have it defined. But literally, when people have the wrong balance of bugs in their system, they convert fiber into short-chain fatty acids, and they increase the amount of calories that they absorb. So here was a study. They had two identical human twins. And in the same environment, one twin became obese and the other remained lean. So they thought, well, let's do a fecal transplant. So they took feces from the obese twin, put it in the backside of an identical twin mouse. They did the same with the lean twin. And on the exact same diet, the exact same quantity, the exact same quality, the exact same feeding time, the mouse that had the obese microbiome became obese. So they've even talked about fecal transplants as ways of promoting weight loss. Now, at first that seemed like a very bad idea to me. But yet I have a high-level attorney as a patient that struggled with obesity his entire life. Learned about this, connected with one of my mentors, actually, Dr. Sid Baker, who did fecal transplants on autistic patients in the 1990s with good success. And interestingly enough, in the next 6 months, this lifelong obese individual lost 60 pounds after a fecal transplant. Pretty fascinating there. So Ganoderma is a very powerful fat loss agent. If you're looking at it from food, we have shakes that taste like liquid birthday cake. And one of the mechanisms by which Ganoderma promotes fat loss is by creating a more lean-friendly gut microbiome. Really good shakes, good taste, and good function. When we look at the gut, it's literally a tube within our body. So I use this as an analogy. These individuals are in the shark tank, but not in the shark tank. And so when food goes through our body, it's kind of like those individuals in there. Something has to happen to get it across that barrier. And so it has to be digested and absorbed. So our gut should be a barrier. Imagine if you had a leaky tube here, that would be a problem, right? Certainly the individuals could drown, or if it was a big enough hole, they could get out and be somebody else's meal. But the primary things that maintain a leaky gut is actually vitamin D and the amino acid glutamine are very, very good for that. And then later on, we'll do a presentation on autoimmunity, but getting foreign proteins into our system is something that really stresses the immune system and can lead to autoimmunity. By the way, I'm also a huge fan of bovine colostrum as a passive immune support. Stress is one of the enemies of the gut, and literally we have 70 to 80% of the immune system around the gut, so stress can shut down the gut-associated immune tissue system. But Dr. Carey, you may see this certainly a lot more than I ever would, but it's estimated there are 570,000 emergency room visits every year in the US for sepsis, and potentially 200,000+ deaths with a cost approaching $17 billion. So in animal studies to study sepsis, they used a very, very strong drug called indomethacin at a dose that would actually trigger sepsis by damaging the gut and leaking the bacteria into the system. And they knew what dose of indomethacin would do that. Well, when they gave them Ganoderma, they did not develop sepsis. They didn't get the leaky gut. So very powerful option there. And Ganoderma does a lot of really good things for the gut, including balancing the bugs, enhancing mucus protection. Propionate is a short-chain fatty acid known to prevent colon cancer. Finally, we're going to talk about poop right. Most estimates say that food should pass through your body within an 18 to 22-hour cycle. We have plenty of people that, they think it's normal to go every other day, or God forbid, every third day. And I let them know that that is not healthy. The primary job of the colon is absorption, and you're absorbing a number of toxins. So when it comes to bowel function, I always tell people that fiber, water, and neurologic tone are the primary keys. So we went through the 5 things that are important for our gut. We want to make good food choices. We want to enhance digestion. We want to create a favorable environment for the bugs, possibly use probiotics. We want to make sure that we are eliminating appropriately and sealing and healing against the leaky gut. And I may just make a few comments on Ganoderma, and then we can bring it up for questions. But Ganoderma is a medicinal mushroom that's now has fame worldwide. In fact, the mushroom market is nearly $50 billion, with the US Ganoderma market, according to a PubMed study, being about $2.5 billion a year. This publication says that Ganoderma-infused beverages, or also known as reishi-infused beverages, are the top food trend, and we both use a certified organic Ganoderma that, by the way, the company that we have partnered with has a process by which they infuse it into their coffee and tea in a way that people can enjoy getting it every day, with the highest level of quality certification I've seen anywhere that I've lectured for any nutrition company I've lectured for. And of course, we like to invite people to try this, right? So reach out to us or whoever referred you to the replay and ask for some of it. Or an easy way, we'll share this Zoom in some Facebook groups that we have. You can watch it again and again. And then certainly get back to whoever invited you to see if there are any questions. But at this point, I will open it up for questions. So it can either be typed in the chat box, you could be unmuted, unmute yourself and ask, or whatever works best. So Dr. Carey, I might start with you. Any questions at all?
So this is a lot of really useful information for all of us. And if we go back and look at all the stuff you discussed on GI, maybe someone is wondering, where do I start? Where do I start with all of this? What's the first step?
You know, I think the first step is consciousness, you know, knowing that you may or may not have a challenge. But when we look at food choices, one of my mentors said this. He said, if God made it, it's okay. If man made it, don't touch it. And other people might be more comfortable with the term natural. But, you know, if it's organic and non-genetically modified, grown in rich soil, that's good. But I like people to listen to their bodies. So we talked a little bit about the mono meal. Eat one food per meal, and then learn to listen how your body responds to that. And as one of my mentors said, don't listen to the taste buds. Those can fool you. But someone else said, if good food doesn't taste good to you, you're not hungry enough. And there have been periods of my life where I've done, you know, the longest fast I've done is 4 days. But I can tell you, it really doesn't matter what beautiful, nutritious food. You know, it could be something that I previously didn't enjoy, like raw kale. If I'm after a 4-day fast, my body welcomes it. So good food choices, one food per meal, good start for most.
And I have one more question, referring back to the Ganoderma. You know, it's a pretty popular product out there, and people are going on the internet and finding it all over. How do we know that we have good quality Ganoderma? And are all the products out there that are organic, are they good quality products?
So that is a brilliant question. And I tell people I use the internet for a lot of things. And I think it's one of the best tools we've ever had. But I don't use it for nutrition. And so there's even people that'll buy pharmaceuticals on the internet. And it's estimated that 1 in 10 ingestible products are counterfeit. And in fact, there was a sting operation where Ganoderma was part of the counterfeit offerings that some companies had. So when you look at the quality certification that we have, and so you get it from someone you trust, your patients are going to trust you. Certainly my patients trust me. Whoever you have a good relationship with that can lead you directly to the supplier, you know, whether, when I say directly, you could actually choose to be a wholesale buyer or get what you know is certified. That's a really good choice. But most of the Ganoderma sold in the world is grown in this fashion. It's grown in a plastic bag. And so as we teach our students or even patients, the purpose of the physical exam is to look at the outside of the individual to gain insight as to what's happening on the inside. You can look at 2 trees and tell which one's sick and which one's not, just as you can look at 2 different varieties of Ganoderma and see which one looks healthier to you. So the rich color, the rich texture, the phytonutrient level is there, and it's certainly not here. But since these are grown without herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, they can be declared organic, even though they're not USDA certified organic, like every bit of Ganoderma that goes into our products. And I let people know if there's something going on in your system where you need a bigger dose, we also have capsules available. But our primary delivery system is coffee and tea, and even for kids, hot chocolate, or even delicious shakes. But the reality is that we should have a buyer beware society, and I don't recommend ever buying any consumable on the internet.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, Dr. Bob, thank you so much for being here with me today and giving us so much wonderful information. I really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it. And, you know, one thing I certainly love is that together we can certainly help a lot more people than we can alone. So I'm looking forward to a long and wonderful synergistic relationship. And I wish all a happy, healthy, beautiful day.
Bye.
Bye-bye for now.